Travis, brother, thanks for joining me.
What up, Brad? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Father of two. Just recently, we were just talking about it a little bit, but the go-to question: are you sleeping at all?
Yeah, man. I kind of alluded to it earlier before we hit the record button, but luckily my son is a good sleeper. He's my older one. He's almost two now, like a month or two away from turning two, and he's just been like MVP all-star sleeper. You know what I mean? Like if there was an MVP of sleepers, like he would win it. So we got lucky with him. He's slept through the night since he was 3 weeks old. And usually gets a solid 12 hours in. Although I will say in the last like a week ago, my wife and I were downstairs. And in the morning we kind of have a little bit of a routine. So I get up around 4 to 4:30, and then I'm at the gym by 5, and then I come back, and then my wife goes to the gym. And so we both get gym time in before our son gets up, and then we kind of swap out a little bit of time with our daughter because she's 3 months. And so we're downstairs kind of talking before my wife went to the gym. And after I had just gotten back, and my son just starts walking into the living room. And so he, for the first time, got out of his crib this past week. He's a big kid, man. He's almost two, but he's been in the 95th percentile for like height and weight and head size and all the above. So he got out of his crib a lot sooner than we thought he was going to get out. And so now that's been a little bit of a difficulty because usually when he wakes up and tosses and turns anytime between like 4 a.m. and 7 a.m., he just conks back out and doesn't get up until like 8:30 or 9. But we've had a little bit of issues with that recently. So the last week or so since he's been doing that has been a little bit more difficult to clock in those sleep hours. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So with my daughter, I get up with her usually first in the morning, or I'll be up, and then whenever she wakes up, I'll take her, let my wife sleep in a little bit,
Yeah.
and she's a little slower moving in the mornings, but it's super inconsistent like that. Like she's always been inconsistent with her wake up time. My daughter, that is, of like it could be anywhere between like 5:30 and like 7:30. So my
Yeah.
morning routine has gotten very flexible in terms of, okay, this might be 20 minutes, this might be
Right.
2 hours, who knows, we'll see what we can get done.
Yeah. Right. Like I still haven't like journaled or anything today, which I usually do. Like as soon as I get home from the gym and my wife leaves, I have some like kind of quiet time for me to
Mm,
kind of like get my day situated and stuff. And did not get that this morning. So yeah, I just kind of have to adjust and move on.
yeah, roll with the fatherhood punches. So
Exactly.
let's talk about your morning routine. What does that, if say your son is sleeping till his normal time and you can kind of roll through it in an ideal world, what's that morning routine look like?
Yeah, ideal world for sure would be a caveat before I go through this. But basically, my alarm goes off at 4. Depending on how I feel, I either go immediately back to sleep and get up at 4:30, or I get up at 4. But either way, I'm to the gym by 5 is kind of the goal there. So if like, I just kind of base it on how I'm feeling that morning. If I feel really great, I'll get up at 4 and then just start doing some of my morning routine in the gym parking lot
Mm,
because I got to get out of my house. Like if I don't get out of my house, I'll just fall back asleep or sitting on the couch or whatever. So I get out of my house immediately, 4:30, and then I go downstairs, grab my water, get some pre-workout, and then head to the gym. And then depending on the time that I get there, because I work out with a couple buddies, if I get there early, then I'll read in my car and start to journal a little bit. But if not, then I just go straight to my workout. And then when I get back home, I'll shower, get ready for the day, come downstairs, put on a pot of coffee, and then start journaling, which is basically just like, hey, what am I thankful for? Write out some affirmations, and then write out a couple of things that I've learned recently, because usually at the gym or on the way to or in from the gym, I'm listening to audiobook or a podcast or something. And so I'll try to record something down, or if I read before the journaling, then I'll record something down that I read recently or that I listened to recently, and just try to like, get it out of my head and write it down for better retention and stuff. So I'll do those 3 things, and then I'll write out my power list for the day. Like what are the tasks that absolutely need to be accomplished? And then
mm.
here's some additional tasks that if I have time, I can also get to these. And then I get started on some more project-based work. I try not to look at social media or email Early in the morning, the majority of my morning is usually spent doing the projects that I need to get done and things that I need to focus my brain power on before I start allowing OPA, right? So other people's agenda. I try to get my agenda done, first thing, and then try to make email and clearing all of my inboxes. I try to make that the bottom of my priority list and kind of give that my afternoon time before I wrap up for the day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I like that you give yourself that flexibility on the wake up time in terms of listening to your body, seeing how it feels. Cause I have a similar approach. I think my window might be a little bit more than 30 minutes some days though of when I'm getting up.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
hear you, man. Yeah, it became that way when I had kids, bro. Like I've
mm,
never, like, the fact that I'm saying that I'm getting up before 5 a.m. Yeah, like people that I grew up with like don't even believe it. You know what I mean? Like I was never that person. I always like sleeping in. I was always more of a night owl. I was more productive at night. That's when I would study for my classes. That's when I would write my projects. That's when I would do my best work, was at night between, like, 9 p.m. and midnight. And then I would always sleep in. But man, with kids, I just almost don't have a choice. Like if I want to get all the things done in a day that I need to get done, I gotta get up earlier. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's just almost impossible to get it done with the kids' sleep schedules. And then my wife, she works as well, and she goes to the gym as well, and all those things. So for both of us to be able to get everything in, it just doesn't work out. If I want to sleep in or whatever. But I do give myself a little bit of that window when I wake up in the morning, and from that 4 o'clock to 4:30, 4:45 ish time frame, there's a little bit of grace period there.
Hmm. Yeah, I found the same thing because my wife works too. And that time when I wake up before anybody else is really the only time I have full control. During the
Exactly.
workday, there's stuff that comes up. During the evenings, there's stuff that comes up. And
Exactly. Get pulled
um,
in a dozen different directions. Yep.
exactly. So for those folks who are listening who don't know your story and aren't familiar with you and your brand, I met you. I think you were probably less than 20 episodes into the Build Your Network podcast, and you were doing a few other things, and it was your side hustle at the time. And that feels like last year. I know it's probably a little longer than that, but fast forward, and you're featured in Forbes as one of the top 10 podcasts that's going to change your life, next to guys like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss. And you've got several businesses, full-time entrepreneur at a very high level. Can you just kind of fill in the gaps there? Because there was clearly massive acceleration in there, but super cool journey.
Yeah, sure, man. It's funny when I was hopping on this interview with you, because I was trying to think back, and I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that your show was the first podcast I was ever interviewed on.
Wow.
Yeah. So to
Well,
rewind the
I
clock.
had no idea, but you crushed it back then
Yes.
even.
So I remember like listening to the interview when it came out, because I was like so excited that I was on a podcast. I was like, oh, I was on a podcast, you know what I mean? And I remember like just jumping on and being like, wow, that was a cool experience. But yeah, that was August of 2017 that I launched Build Your Network. So it was probably around that same time frame that we
Yeah.
initially connected. And yeah, so that was at the very beginning of what I was working on at the time. Basically I was doing door-to-door sales, and I knew that I didn't want to be doing that for very long, but I also didn't know what that meant. Like, where do I go from here? How do I get into something different? What's something that I really actually care about, that I want to be doing, that feeds into the lifestyle that I want to live, and allows me to make good money and travel and have freedom and
Mm.
do things that fire me up. And so I started the podcast as trying to make money that way, but I just didn't know how it was going to work out. So in the last 3.5, almost 4 years, it's been just testing and trying different avenues and putting together different products and services and packages and offers and all these different things, and trying to sell it, and just kind of kept building and growing, and we've learned a lot. in the past few years, and learned a lot more about the things that we do well inside of our business, and then the things that we can help other people do well, and then eventually got into the software game through the podcast and all that stuff too. So yeah, now we have our course and coaching business, the Podcast Profit Academy, and then we have our software company Guestio, and those are really the two main things that we're pushing forward at the moment. And we still have Build Your Network, and we're coming up on 600 episodes on the show really
Wow.
soon. So yeah, it's been a busy few years, man.
So, what do you think is the kind of catalyst for why the podcast, which really started it all, was so successful? Because it seems like on both sides, in terms of the guests you were able to attract and connect with and bring on the show, as well as the audience side, it's obviously grown and attracted a very large audience. So, what do you think are the catalysts or the drivers behind the success on both ends of the show?
I would just say consistency and persistence. I mean, it was a slow growth period, man. And we're still kind of in that same thing. Like we've never really experienced a period of just astronomical or exponential growth. It's all just
Mm,
been slow and steady over time, and really didn't, get to six-figure downloads a month until we were able to spend money in marketing to get it there. So there was some organic growth for sure. But then some paid growth along the way. But I mean, I would say the common denominator catalyst would be what you already kind of referred to, which was the guest lineup.
mm,
And I lived by when I first started my show, there were two quotes that meant a lot to me, and one of them I had on my phone wallpaper, and one of them I had written on the top of my whiteboard in my office. And the phone wallpaper was from Gary Vee, and it was a one, a greater than sign, and a zero. And basically, the whole concept was like, look, if you have anybody in your audience that's willing to give you the time of day, just one person, it's better
mm.
than having no people. So one person is better than zero people. And you need to be as grateful for that one person as you would be for an audience of a million people. And it just kind of reframed the way that I looked at my audience. So that was the first thing. But the second thing was a quote from Steve Martin, who's, got to be, if there was a Mount Rushmore of comedy acting, Steve Martin would be on it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he hit the quote that I kind of live by with him is be so good they can't ignore you.
Mm,
And I don't know why when I read that it seems so obvious, right? It seems like it's so obvious it doesn't even need to be said. But sometimes that's the best advice. And when I read that, I forget where it was. I remember just hit me like a ton of bricks of just like, wow, that's really what it's all about. Like if you can get that good at something, then people can't help but give you attention for that thing. And he proved that, man. Like he built an amazingly successful career in an industry that's extremely difficult to get into,
hmm.
like at all, let alone at the time that he got into it, when there was like gatekeepers on gatekeepers on gatekeepers, and you had to only take this one traditional path in order to be able to make a living doing this thing of comedy. Like now you can go TikTok viral or have a YouTube channel or start a podcast, and like there's so many avenues to being able to get to be able to do those types of things full time. But back then it was just a very very one path traditional way of doing it. But he just got that good at comedic acting and comedy that people couldn't help but hire him and give him opportunities. And that to me was just like a really cool way to think about it, because I was like, that's doable.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a it wasn't a hack or a practice or like something about luck or whatever. It was like, no, that's like it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it means that it's repeatable and it's doable. And that's a path that I can, mirror. And so from the beginning, that's why I started to get the best names in the world, because I kind of looked at it that way. I was like, look, it doesn't matter if like nobody wants to hear from Travis right now because nobody knows who Travis is. So who they do want to hear from are all the people that they already know, like, and trust, and, want to hear more value from. So if I can just connect with those people and ask them good questions, then I'm bound to get an audience at some point, along the way. And that basically kind of became my goal. And that's what ended up happening. And I think that has been the biggest driver of my business, which is exactly why we built the software that we have. And that's one of the big things that we teach inside of our academy and stuff, is getting these huge name guests to come to appear on your show.
yeah.
And that's what the software does. It connects creators, podcasters, and people like that with high level guests that they can bring on their shows. So that's really been our MO from the beginning.
And what's that software name for people who are listening? Like, yeah, I need that in my life.
Yeah, it's called Guestio. So you can just go to guestio.com. So the word guest, io.com.
Perfect. But yeah, I mean, I want to be Travis Chappell, and I grew up, I'm kind of following that same path of people don't necessarily want to listen to me talking about fatherhood. I'm trying to bring on the guys like yourself who are these studs who folks do know of and want to hear them. And frankly, I'm pretty new at the whole fatherhood thing too. So I don't have too much,
I'm
I don't
with
have
you on
too
that,
much
man.
wisdom to share just yet, but
I hear you on that. Yeah.
the other thing you said there too is that, there was just that one path for Steve Martin, and it was just hard to follow that one path. And it's a little easier today because there's different avenues, but I think it still is that same grind required because, like podcasting, for example, say you pick that avenue, it's so noisy. There's so many podcasts coming out every single week that you
Right.
really do have to be so good that they can't ignore you.
Yeah.
And I learned that with my last show, where, over time, the passion for it just fizzled out. I didn't have clarity on what it was from the beginning. It was a great learning experience for me, but
Yeah.
it wasn't about being the best podcaster in the world or having the best show. And, especially you learn back, listening to those early episodes. And yeah, it certainly wasn't, because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But, but I think you're right. I think you just got to be be so good they can't ignore you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had already started the podcast, started building your business. Were you full-time entrepreneurship and full-time in your business and entrepreneurship by the time your first kiddo rolled around?
Yes, I was. Yeah, probably like 6 months into it or something like that. He was born a Cinco de Mayo of 2019, and I went full time with my business in like October of 2018. So, yeah, I mean, 8, 9 months at that point, full time in the business.
So I imagine you're grinding pretty hard. You're pushing pretty hard in terms of really making sure the business is getting off on the right foot. First time that you're solely dependent on the business you're building for your income, and then this new beautiful piece of life comes onto stage. How did that impact, just your mindset, your day, your approach to entrepreneurship and your business, now that you'd also learn how to be a dad and the family's growing?
Yeah, so I kind of had a little bit of a different perspective in terms of like going full time with the business because I've never really had a 9 to 5.
Mm,
So there was a 5 week period of my life where I had a 9 to 5, like an actual like clock in, clock out type of a job. Even then I didn't have to actually clock in, clock out. I just kind of showed up.
yeah.
But anyway, so all my other jobs before that were 100% commission sales,
Mm,
which is pretty similar to owning your business. Like
yeah,
every
for
day you
sure.
got to go out and get money. You don't wake up on Friday and get a deposit in your account because you showed up Monday through
Mm,
Friday. Like you got to go out and earn every dollar that goes into your bank account. So I would say that it probably wasn't as big of a learning curve for me as it was for some other people that are used to that steady paycheck and that consistency and like some, you got benefits and you got a salary and you got these other things. Like I was always paying for my own, medical care, and I kind of already had that stuff. It was just that I was selling a different product and it happened to depend on me, and I also had to do the fulfillment. So
mm,
the fulfillment side has been my biggest thorn in terms of entrepreneurship because I never had to fulfill products. I just got good at selling.
mm,
And so I would sell and hand it off to the people, what I mean, that fulfilled on those products. And then they did their job. I did my job. We're all happy about it. So when I first moved into entrepreneurship, it was a big learning curve for me to be like, oh, I have to create like, what's an SOP? Like what's a process look like? How do you even create a system for something? Like, how do you make sure that your customers are happy with the product? Like I was never somebody that wanted to sell something that people didn't enjoy, but I found myself doing that for a little while, because I didn't know how to fulfill on the product and make people feel happy with their purchase and stuff like that. I just knew how to bring money into the door. So that was a really big learning curve for me. But when I had my son, and to answer your question, the biggest mindset shift for me was in just a renewed passion for why I was doing what I was doing.
mm,
was probably like one of the biggest things. I know that's kind of cliche and probably an answer that a lot of people give, but it's just fact, bro. Like
Yeah.
there's not much more that, can be motivating than like staring in the eyes of a little human child that, you know what I mean? It depends on you for everything in life and looks up to you automatically just for the fact that you're the one that brought him into the world. You know what I mean? So that's like kind of took that really seriously. It's a big weight to carry, and one that I think every parent should take seriously. And there was just a renewed why. Why am I doing this? And I never wanted to be a parent that was do as I say, not as I do kind of a
Mm-hmm.
parent. I didn't want I didn't want to sell out on my dreams, and then in 15 years or like from now, I guess, when he's deciding when he's what he's going to do after high school or whatever, when he's 17, 18. um I didn't want to. I don't want to be in the position where I got to look him in the eye and be like, you can do anything, you can follow your dreams, you can create whatever you want in life, when I know that I didn't give it my best shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wanted to be that type of a parent. It's kind of a renewed motivation to get back out there and get it. You know what I mean? Like, go after your dreams, take huge risks, like put yourself in a position to succeed, and all these different things that I knew in my head, but maybe hadn't tackled as much as I could have. And so that was kind of a renewed thing. In fact, like a month after, or excuse me, no, sorry, about a year after my son was born is when we started development on the software company. So I think a lot of those things are directly correlated to what to the impact that having our first kid had on our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard you talking actually on another podcast saying you never wanted to, you'd rather show your kids that anything is possible than tell them that anything's
Exactly.
possible based on the effort and the results that you put in and got.
Yeah. And
So it makes
like,
sense.
I just feel like I grew up in kind of a really strict religious background. And so there was a lot of that do as I say, not as I do stuff that went around. And there was a lot of hypocritical people around me. And I think I just fostered a just really bad distaste for any sort of hypocrisy that exists. And it really pushes me to, either I'm not going to tell my son that it's possible, or I'm going to show him that it's possible. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be this like, well, I personally didn't fulfill my dreams, but you can,
Right.
like, totally even if you believe it, like it just doesn't hold as much weight, and it probably is going to affect your relationship subconsciously with your kid, because they're probably just going to like not trust you for some reason, but they can't put their finger on why. And it's probably because of something like that, because there's some sort of inconsistency in the way that they've seen you live your life versus what you told them the way to live is. You know what I mean? So I think that has an effect.
Yeah, for sure. I had a sales leader and mentor who was talking to me when I shared that we were expecting our first kid, and he said, he's like, there's a weird thing I've seen in salespeople, especially like salespeople who are driven and care, that they make more money as soon as they have kids. Like they just start performing at a higher level, and it probably traces back to exactly what you're talking about. Like especially with the folks with that mindset. And I think that a lot of times you get that in sales, entrepreneurship, with driven folks. It could be outside of those realms too, but once you see that little human being who's relying on you, and they're going to be looking at you as the example to how to live life, it's like, all right, shit, I better I better really set a pretty strong example
Right.
for this little person as they're growing up, so that I can give them the life I want to give them, but also could be that example. So it's cool to hear you say that. Did it change anything from just kind of a work life balance or integration perspective for you? Like, were you working, 20 or 16 hours a day, and then you cut back, spend more time with your family, or did you already have a good kind of grasp on how you approached time management?
Yeah. What's interesting is at the time I had a business, but I didn't, like, looking at it now, it wasn't really a business. It was more just like freelance coaching
Mm,
basically at the time. You know, and it was doing fairly well comparatively to what most people do, but it still wasn't like a business. Like I still
sure.
had to be in it, and I still had to do the majority of all the tasks that were there. And so we weren't really scaling, weren't really growing. We're still honestly trying to find out like what were we going to try to scale? Like what's the big thing that we want to really put out there and put forward, and what's our main goal? What's our main mission? And so um, during the time that my son was born, like from the time that he was, you know, born until he was a year old, I honestly like just wasn't as busy as most entrepreneurs because I didn't know what activities that I was supposed to be doing. And so it's honestly fairly easy for me to integrate it into my life, especially because like I talked about earlier, our son was so easy in terms of sleeping and stuff. Like from 3 weeks old, bro, he was sleeping from like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. like
It's
every day.
amazing.
So we got real lucky on that. And so when you like look at it that way, and then he was always on a good nap schedule and stuff. So my wife was not working at the time. Well, she was working, but she wasn't working full time.
Mm,
So it was just a completely different dynamic back then. I wasn't working as much. My wife wasn't working as much, and he was a really easy baby, and we only had one, you know. So there was a lot of different things that made it a kind of a, I would say probably easier transition than it looks like to be for most parents going from 0 kids to 1 kid.
yeah. Well, and now you're in the throes of it with 2 kids, and we were talking a little bit, about how the second time around has been a little bit of a different experience,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
and
and
so,
we knew it was gonna happen, man. Like we're like, you know, we hit the lottery with this first kid in terms of sleeping. You know, like what are the odds we're gonna hit it again? You know, like how
mhm.
likely is lightning to strike twice? And the
Turns
answer
out,
is
yeah,
not
not likely.
likely. So, and you know, obviously say that in jest because you know, I think it's funny how people use the term like good baby or bad baby. You know what I mean? It's like it's a baby; they're just crying. You
Right.
know, like it's not, doesn't make them a bad baby.
Right.
It just makes them a baby. So my daughter has been very regular, normal in that sense, and has had trouble sleeping, and has kind of kept us up a little bit more. And then if you combine that with the fact that my son was 19 months when she was born, and walking around and grabbing everything that he's not supposed to, you can't keep your eye off. You can't take your eye off him for a second, or else he's grabbing something else he's not supposed to. And then, you know, she's crying, and you got to chase him around the house. And then it was just a super busy, crazy time at the end of 2020. Obviously, at the end of a crazy year like 2020 was, where we had to say goodbye to a whole big revenue stream because we were doing like live events and retreats
Mm,
and stuff, and that whole thing got canceled. And so we were kind of reinventing the business. And then at the end of the year, we launched our course, our Podcast Profit Academy, and then we launched the software company all within like 30 days. And then my daughter was born in that same time period, and my wife and I were both doing 75 hard up to my daughter being born. So like all of that kind of stuff, like culminating in one, you know, 30 to 60 day period. And then like 2 weeks after my daughter was born, I got COVID and I was out for a week or two. And so there was just like so many things that just happened right in a row. And the first month or two of having our daughter was just like, man, it just, you know, like you kind of said it when we hopped on first, where you're just like, yeah, you black out and you wake up in 3 months. That's basically how it was. You know, like I just
yeah.
didn't really know how we survived it, but we did, and made it to the other side barely. And at the time we were still living in our little like condo that we were renting. And we bought a new place a couple weeks ago, and moved. And so now we have a lot more space. And you know, our daughter's getting a little bit better on her sleep schedule. And the businesses are the coaching business and course business is a lot more automated than it was. I have a full-time head coach now, so I don't have to do all the coaching calls. And then obviously the course is all self-study, so I don't do the fulfillment on that side either. And I have a full-time assistant who's really more than my assistant. She's really like our operations manager, because she does basically the rest of the operational pieces of the business. So, you know, I've been able to take a lot of my time back and kind of focus a little bit more on keeping my schedule for the things that actually require my attention. And then we live in the new place. We have more space, you know. So like it was definitely like 2-3 months of a really trying period. But I think we're out on the other side at this point. So, you know, obviously I'm sure that there's another time right around the corner that'll be similar to that one, but that's just the name of the game.
Yeah, it's those seasons. We moved
Yeah.
when we came home. The day we came home from the hospital with my daughter was our first day in this house. Like
Oh, wow.
she came about a month earlier than expected. And so fortunately I'd gotten done with like 3 weeks of all day renovations and like painting and all that stuff. But we had like a crib and our bed and her dresser. And that was like the only furniture in the house. And
Yeah.
we laugh about it now because somehow in those first couple of weeks, we got the house together, got furniture, did some decorating, and we look around our house now and are like, I have no recollection of like that stuff happening. Like when did we hang anything in this, like on the walls in this room? I have no memory of it.
Yeah, right.
But that's something that guests have shared too. That Kelly Starrett's the one that comes to mind. He was, he's a world class coach and trainer for Olympic level athletes, and just had the first CrossFit in San Francisco. And he was like going through PT school, starting a CrossFit gym, and having his kids all at the same time. And he's just like, it's a chapter of life. My workouts then were 15 minutes in my basement, and some days I was sleeping on my trainer's table at the gym. But we got through it. And then but the priority was the family and
Yeah.
these other things, and some of the other stuff has to suffer a little bit, but you get through
Yeah.
it, and it's just
You
a
just got to
chapter.
do what you got to do, man. You just got to do what you got to do. And too many people, I think, just whine and complain their way through those times. But
Right.
my wife and I, when we sit back and look, man, like those are some of our favorite times in retrospect. Like when we sit
Mm-hmm.
down and look back at just the uncomfortable positions that we put ourselves through in the past. Um, even though we knew they were going to be short term and we knew they were going to be not easy, but you know, it's all about how you look at it and how you frame it in your mind and the kind of attitude that you take with you into every day. And it's incredible the things that you can just kind of get through without whining about it all the time if you just kind of reframe your attitude a little bit.
Yeah, I always love to say to my wife, like, one day we're going to look back and these are going to be the good old days.
Right,
Like, these are the
exactly.
days that they're crazy now, but we'll look back on it and laugh about it. And then we already do from a year ago. And I'm sure we'll have another one day and the same thing will happen. But yeah, it's all about that mindset. So you were
Yeah,
talking a little
yeah,
bit
for sure.
about having, setting that example for your kids, and actually proving that you can be anything you want in life, but by living it and them seeing you live that. Are there specific values that you want to instill in your kids, that you want to live those values and make sure that are you're imprinting on them because those are what's important to you and your family?
That's a really good question, man. I've never taken the time to sit down and write out, like Chappell family values or
Sure.
whatever. But it is a very useful exercise, and I honestly don't really have a great answer for that right now. But if you ask me in a year from now, I definitely will. It's something at the forefront of my mind. I have not to this day taken the time to sit down and write them out. But I do think it's valuable to sit down, write them out, and kind of just preach them over and over to your kids. Um, but yeah, so I honestly don't really have much of an answer for that at the moment, except for just the generic personal development lessons that I've learned
Hmm.
over the past few years, like taking responsibility for everything in your life, regardless of if it's your fault or somebody else's fault. It doesn't really matter. Everything's your responsibility. And, um, the value of a dollar, not being flippant with money and understanding how to earn it. Like that's a big value of mine. And I think like teaching that to kids younger and younger to have a really good relationship with money it's crazy how many people like literally suffer from financial problems
Hmm.
in America, the wealthiest country in the world. And there's people here that suffer from financial problems. You know what I mean? Like we're doing a really, really bad job as a country educating the next generation or any generation on how to manage
Right.
finances, how to earn more money, keep your money, and invest your money. And then we wonder why people are depending on social security when they turn 73 in order to, you know what I mean? Like it just doesn't make any sense. So that's another big value of ours. Family first is another thing that off the top of my head. Like these are all things that I would definitely include in that list, but I don't have never never sat down and written those out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that answer is going to resonate with a ton of people. Like I myself included, I've talked about it on this podcast. Like I've gotten some great tips on kind of how to build out those formal values,
Yeah.
but haven't, written down. I don't have a plaque that says the multifamily values at this
Right.
point. But I think, like you said earlier, it's like how you live your life. And that's and you can sit down and write things that you're not actually living. And
Yeah.
what we were talking about earlier, your kids are like, well, that's bullshit. Like
Right.
I don't
Right.
see that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the fact that you could just, what those are intrinsically, because that's what you're living, I think
Yeah.
is very telling to, if you go through that process, what they're going to come out as anyways.
And I think a great place to start is Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. So, I mean, that's a really easy copy and paste value set right there, Um, but yeah, anything that's similar to those things, like John Wooden's, never lie, never cheat, never steal, don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses. Like those are all things that I hold in high esteem and high regard, and things that I hope to pass on to my kids for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people who see that example of ownership in their parents and in the people they look up to,
Yeah.
that it's crazy how much they absorb from an early age and how much they just, by osmosis and being around that type of behavior, that they're gonna model that. So I think I think you're gonna have no problems there with passing that along to the generations to come of Chappells.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we will see.
So is there any advice that either you were given about being a dad that you think was the top advice that you were given, or that you would give to a new young dad who's just starting off on their fatherhood journey?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that I would be able to say that I've learned from other people, I don't know if I could point to one person specifically, but just show up is one of the big things. I think that again, I'm like you, bro. I'm a new dad. I don't have a lot of advice to give to dads because I feel like I'm unqualified to give advice on being a dad because I'm so new to it myself. But I just that's why one of my values is freedom. One of my big values is freedom, and like I don't make decisions that take away from my freedom because I value showing up, and I value being there for not just the big moments, but being there and showing up for anything that's important to my kids. So I guess show up would be the first one. Just be there, and a lot of times it doesn't even matter what happens after you show up. It just matters that you're there, and I think that really means a lot
Yeah.
to kids. So that would be the one thing that I would say. And then the second thing I would say would be to keep the commitments that you make to your kids. I think that's a huge thing. I feel, and again, take all this with a grain of salt because I'm a new dad, but I feel that one of the biggest issues with parent child relationships is the lack of trust that exists inside of the relationship. And the parent can get really mad at that all they want, but at the end of the day, would you trust you? If you don't even trust yourself because you can't even keep the promises you make to yourself, and you have a bad relationship with you because you can't keep your own promises to you, and you know that you can't keep your own promises to you, then why are you upset with your kids for not trusting you when you can't keep the promises you make to them either? You know what I mean? Like I just feel that that's a big piece of personal development in general, but especially when it comes to a relationship with your kids. You can't be willy-nilly. I think that's the problem. I don't think people have a problem following through on commitments. I think people have a problem committing to too many things. You know what I mean? And so I'm very, very cautious about what I commit to, because as soon as I commit to it, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But and I'm sure that there's some stuff that I'm not thinking about that I've messed up on before. And I'm not suggesting that I'm perfect in any way, but I do my best to make sure that no matter what, if this is something I commit to, that everybody knows that I'm going to follow through on that commitment, whatever it
Mhm.
is. It could be like something like 75 hard, just like a health challenge like that. During 75 hard, I injured my back doing squats, and I had to do my second workout that day still. Bro, my outdoor workout, I went on a walk because that's all I could barely do. It took me 37 minutes to walk 1 mile because my back was just killing me from my workout at the gym that morning. But like I still did it, and I think that there's value to that. And I think there's value in your kids seeing you do that, because again, that's how they're going to learn. They're not going to learn by you saying like, well, you committed to this, so you better do it. And it's like, well, Dad, didn't you just commit to something last week? And then like, didn't you just commit to, no sugar for a month? And I just saw you eating a Twinkie last night or whatever. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, I'm just saying, get in the habit of keeping your commitments. And if that means you make fewer commitments, then make fewer commitments and bring it down to 0 for a little bit and see how that feels. And then slowly start getting into it. But give all of your attention to something that you commit to, because it's insanely important, not only for your own confidence and your own relationship with yourself, but for your kids to see that, you know what, when mom and dad make a commitment, they stick with it. And especially if it's a commitment to your kid about something that you're going to do with or for them. Like
Mm.
that is you know what I mean? Like if you start breaching those walls of trust, then what do you have with your kid? Like you can't just be friends with them. That's a harsh reality that I've come to face in the last couple of years. You know that before you're a parent, that's technically not your job to be their friend. It's your job to be their parent. But then when you have a kid and you can see the disdain in their eyes for you when you discipline them, it hurts.
Yeah.
Like it hurts a lot more than I thought it was going to. But at the end of the day, I know that that's my responsibility is not to be their friend. My responsibility is to be their parent and to shape them up to be a functioning human adult that does good things in the world. And so that's my job. You know what I mean? That's my role in their life. And of course I want to be their friend too. But maybe, in the meantime, you just got to focus on instilling the right values that will make them, like I said, a, a contributing member of society in the future. And so, yeah, I know that was kind of all over the place type of an answer, but hopefully that in a roundabout way helps.
No, it totally does. And it reminds me, Robert Glazer was on the show and he was talking about like reframing your idea of success for your kids and success in general from being success, 5 minutes from now. It's that short-term versus long-term perspective of versus success 10, 20, 30 years from now. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Do you want them to be successful, abled human beings who are able to really thrive in this world long term? And then it requires that discipline with them and being the one who's able to keep them on that straight path. And yeah, they might tell you that they hate you right now, but odds are they're not going to be telling you that in 15 years,
Right.
um, you also, your first point there of, just being there. I have a list of ideas in my journal. These are the things that will either never happen, it's just like a brain dump, or will happen in 10 years. But I want to create the ultimate guide to fatherhood. I have a book called The Ultimate Guide to Fatherhood, and every page just says be there. And it's like a leather bound, like
Yeah.
epic book that's all it is. It's 100 pages of just be there. And you can give it
Yeah.
to a new dad. And it's like, here's the formula. Like
Yeah.
there's
Right.
a lot of nuances here, but if you follow this, then,
Right.
things aren't going to go totally to shit.
Exactly. That's the thing, is like, you're going to end up pretty okay.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I've realized too as a parent, bro, is like, no, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, because there's no
Mm-hmm.
such thing as a perfect person.
Right.
And the sooner you can come to grips with the fact that you're going to screw up, um, I think that gives you a little bit of freedom to, you know, parent to the fullest extent that how, because you're gonna make mistakes,
Yeah.
and one day your kid will have to go to therapy to work through the issues that they have from
that's
growing up in your
that's
household. You
exactly
know what I
right.
mean? But like, that's part of the deal, man. Like you can't let that, you can't let that stop you from being their parent, like I said, and trying to default into just being their friend. And
Mhm.
because that's just what you wish your parents would have done with you or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like you gotta, like you said, just show up, be there, and just try to get those main messages across of like, look, I'll be there whenever you need me, and I love you no matter what. You know what I mean? And if you can relay that information through action and showing up and being consistent through decades of being a parent, I think that that's a win. But again, ask me in 20 years, bro. Ask me in 20 years.
Dude, I feel you. I mean, yeah, you're right. No perfect parent. Because there's no perfect people and there's no perfect kid either. Like you can't you can't have the expectations of creating the perfect human being child offspring because it ain't gonna happen. You're right. You're gonna go therapy for something that you did, whether you like it or not, no matter how great you are at the
Exactly.
gig. um,
Yep.
Travis, man, this has been great. I know we're wrapping up on time here. So you mentioned some awesome resources, but where would you point people to, find out more about you, Guestio, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I guess probably the best way would be if you're listening to the show and you've ever thought about running your own podcast. We have a free training that we do on how to grow and monetize a podcast. So you can find that over at podcastprofitcourse.com. It's totally free to check out the initial free training that we do, and then you can kind of see if maybe starting a podcast would be a good fit for you.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll have that all linked up. Travis, appreciate you as always, brother. Thanks for coming on. It's good to connect with you, and good luck with both those little ones. Hopefully the sleep keeps ramping up and things normalize a little bit here soon.
Happy to chat, Brad. Thanks a lot for having me on the show.